Hi, Yummy fans. It's me, Yummy, and welcome back to the Yummy Show. Today, I want to tell you all a story. It's the story of a lady named Marsha and how she and her friends helped make history and bring about the celebration of Pride. Marsha P. Johnson was born on August 24th, 1945, in Elizabeth, New Jersey. She had a different name back then. She moved to New York City when she was only 17, with $15 in her purse and a small bag of clothes on her back. She worked the streets with hustlers and other homeless queer folks. Back then, it was actually illegal to be queer, so finding jobs was next to impossible, and many survived the way she did. She used to work near the Howard Johnsons at 6th Avenue and 8th Street. Meeting other LGBTQ folks helped her to realize who she was, and she gave herself the name Marsha P. Johnson. She always said the P stood for Pay It No Mind. Marsha also worked as a drag queen. She didn't have much money and couldn't buy fancy looks like some other queens, but she always made do with what she had. She sometimes had no home to go to, so she slept under tables used for sorting flowers and would make the discarded blossoms into beautiful crowns that became her trademark look. Marsha was a member of the famous drag troupe Hot Peaches from 1972 all the way into the 1990s. In 1975, she was photographed by Andy Warhol himself for his series Ladies and Gentlemen. There was a gay-friendly bar in Greenwich Village called the Stonewall Inn. Marsha often went there. In the early morning hours of June 28, 1969, the police raided Stonewall. The cops beat the patrons with batons and threw them in jail, simply because they were different. They eventually set the whole place on fire. But the people had had enough of being abused, and that night they fought back. Nobody knows for sure who threw the first punch or brick, and it honestly doesn't matter. Marsha may not have been the one. In fact, she herself denied even being there when it first began. She had heard that the community was rising up, so she and her good friend, Sylvia Rivera, went to help their people. They were two of many trans women of color who joined the fray. The riot started that night and lasted for almost a week, and marches and protests in support sprung up all over the village. After the uprising, Marsha and Sylvia joined the Gay Liberation Front. On the first anniversary of the Stonewall Rebellion, Marsha marched in the first Gay Pride Rally, which at the time was called Christopher Street Liberation Day. Both Marsha and Sylvia became activists, staging protests and sit-ins. The two founded the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, or STAR for short. They did great activism for the community. But in 1973, Marsha and Sylvia were banned from the Pride Parade by the Gay and Lesbian Parade Committee, who said they didn't want trans people there because they gave the LGBT a bad name. Well, Marsha and Sylvia had worked too long and too hard to let that stand, so they got ahead of the parade and marched in front of them all. The two friends started the Star House, a shelter for homeless gay and trans kids. They paid the rent themselves with money they made on the streets. Though the house wasn't focused on the performing arts, Marsha was considered the drag mother of Star House, in keeping with the long-standing tradition of chosen family in the queer community. She worked hard to provide food, clothes, and love for all the kids whose families threw them away for being gay, trans, or gender non-conforming. Marsha continued to be an important street activist, well-respected organizer, and marshal with the group ACT UP. In 1992, artist George Siegel's Stonewall Memorial was moved to Christopher Street in honor of the gay liberation movement. Marsha commented of the piece, "How many people have died for these two little statues to be put in the park to recognize gay people? How many years does it take for people to see that we're all brothers and sisters and human beings in the human race? I mean, how many years does it take for people to see we're all in this rat race together?" Sadly, in 1992, shortly after New York City's Pride Parade, Marsha passed away. Nobody knows what happened to her, but her body was found in the Hudson River. Those who knew her best insisted it was not a suicide, though that was the coroner's finding. The circumstances were suspicious, but the police closed the case anyway. The loss of Marsha was felt by the entire community. Her ashes were released into the river by her friends and chosen family. The police even closed all of 7th Avenue as the river carried her away. But thanks to the tireless work of fellow trans activist Victoria Cruz, Marsha's case was reopened in 2016, and her cause of death went from suicide to undetermined. Her work was filmed by documentarian David France for his award-winning film, The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson. Though she may be gone, Marsha's legacy will never be forgotten by the community she worked so hard for. RuPaul Charles, host of the world-famous drag reality competition Drag Race, called her an inspiration. He described her as the true drag mother who paved the way for all of us. In 2018, the New York Times published an official belated obituary for her. A huge mural depicting Marsha and Sylvia was displayed in Dallas, Texas in 2019 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots. It's the largest mural in the world honoring the trans community. In June of 2019, Marsha was one of the first 50 American pioneers, trailblazers, and heroes inducted on the Stonewall National Monument in New York City's Stonewall Inn, or SNM. The SNM is the first U.S. national monument dedicated to LGBTQ rights and history. In February of 2020, the governor of New York announced that the East River State Park in Brooklyn will be renamed in Marsha's honor. And on June 30th of that year, Google celebrated Marsha with a Google Doodle. And even Marsha's hometown would put up a monument in her memory. So there you go, Yammy fans. I hope you all enjoyed learning about Marsha and the history of Pride. It's so important to remember and honor those who blazed a trail for us. So let's all show our colors and celebrate our pride. Woohoo! Thanks for coming by, Yami fam.